All right, so welcome everybody. Are we streaming okay today?
Facebook is no, it says unable to connect.
Oh, what a drag. Okay. Yeah. I guess we don't know why that is, right?
No, I don't.
Can we post something asking people to tune into YouTube if they're waiting? Because I know some folks wait there.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Oh,
take it. Facebook.
Yeah,
Can you hear Geshe all right?
Yep.
Okay. So first of all, Tashi. Oh yeah, so can everyone mute themselves so we don't get background noise? Sorry. Dave, I think it's actually coming from you because I hear us. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. So just a greetings, Tashi Deli, to everyone. Geshe hopes that you're all well and happy. So also, as we gather here today, let us just recollect a very important recognition that both the causes and the conditions that we need to achieve a meaningful happiness are something internal, something within us. And so it's very important also to have this understanding that as we continue our study and practice, to be able to work towards becoming a Bodhisattva, to be able to work towards Buddhahood, that we have an understanding that is unbroken and complete, right? That we have a complete set of information. So if we want to be able to achieve that, so then if we want to be able to achieve that state of liberation, for example, for ourselves, what do we need to do that? If we want to be able to achieve the state of complete Buddhahood, supreme enlightenment, what do we need to be able to do that? And so then today's teachings are specifically connected with the Sūtra aspects of the path. So from practicing the Sūtra teachings, what is the complete way that we practice to be able to reach that goal of enlightenment?
And for those of
you who are engaging in the tantric teachings, who have received empowerment and are engaging in the teachings of Tantra, then you need to be able to understand and also in a complete way practice a union of Sutra and Tantra, and also there should be at least one sadhana of the various deities that you practice that you understand really well and know how to practice correctly.
Because
what happens for so many of us is that we have little bits and pieces of Sutra and little bits and pieces of Tantra and various deities that we're practicing, but we don't achieve sort of a sense of a completion or groundedness in one. And then the danger of that, right, is that we never find a focus. So, of course, there are different things that we need to cultivate, and even from the perspective of Tantra, there are compelling reasons, right, to practice various deities. However, the advice still holds that there should be one practice that we do really well. So, however we approach our practice, from the point of view of Tantra, of practicing various deities, or from the point of view of practicing, for example, the Lamrim, the stages of the path, according to perhaps receiving teachings of various schools, whether Sakya, Geluk, Kagyu, and Nyingma. As we do that, And that's absolutely fine to do that. There should be at least one where we have an idea of that complete path and its stages. This is very important.
어다 드니치레도 어다 드니 소소 디세리모요나 어다 뇰레 디세리wo 어다 레카도 드니노 칼레칼레 다 디세소 카르와스.
And also, we also understand, right, that the path of practice is a long one. 주주림포데네?
세는 그때 디세리wo 뛰어요나 로조도 뇰레 디세리워서야 거봐요.
sorry.
칼레칼레 칸노.
I'm getting the sauce today. So it's just one of those days. So then accordingly also, right, to the time and facility that we have. When we have more free time, then we can accordingly lengthen our practice and do things more elaborately.
어다 리필로셀 할레비샤타와 깨다 치모치 페바레스. 어다 디세리워 마레스 다테 아까사라와 나마 자갈라 요아레스 다도 군바조 사라와.
So Geshe recollects the story of a great Lama from the Drepung Loseling monastery, and this is a Lama from recent times, and he was very widely respected and somebody who spent a lot of time in isolated retreat.
어다 키그머게 로조 다테제 다 코로 gem바노 로조서 그라와스. 로조 저비 까니 발레르지 프게 게그칼 콤보서 그랭마. 발레.
Bale.
Yeah. 발레르지 콤보서네 제 종안이 하셨는지 프게 소용 거.
Ale.
갈센 동시.
Hagoson.
어떤이 소요 아레스.
Yeah. And so how he sustained himself in retreat, I don't know how to describe this to you guys, but for those of you who have been to the monasteries in South India, you know that there's kind of like a bread that comes with tea in the morning that's a round circular shape. It's a very simple bread that's made with pretty much flour and water, and I don't think very much else. So what this particular Lama did is you get a lot of these circular breads when you attend pujas. So he would keep those bread and he would dry them in the window of his retreat place, and he would take little nibbles of that to sustain himself, right? That was his kind of renunciation.
셔틀라마 모모게테니 소게레테니 잔치티 디세리 모쳐 초보차사로와스. 자노마 르테니 치무사는 좋아.
So actually several lamas were known to do this, and the bread still becomes edible because although it might be hard from having stayed in the sun many days, you can dip it in your tea, and in this way you can kind of sustain yourself that way.
단달라마 티게테 세난다고 지네 tombo 페체도 니빠 페체도 말레레자 다테스 조요아레스.
And so this particular lama, you know, being kind of very, I guess you could say, thrifty, he would dry these breads and he would just take little pieces of them according to what he needed.
아니 코로로파스고 다 드니 기버스도 와서 마데 다 베테스 만 유버스 메와지쇼 센다보다 드니 동스네 라기아레스.
And some of his friends sort of thought it was a little bit over the top, a little bit strange, and said, you know, eat it when it's still nice. There's no reason to kind of dry it in this way.
다 디디카 라마티 가르친 거 요아레스네 레카 가레이나 또 뭐니 차지지 그거레스. 셀.
But what the Lama said is that as I eat, just as any other activity I engage in, first there needs to be a kind of map in the mind, a particular set of steps of how to go about it.
다까 디디네 라마티가 오탕아 부게 로주 차소 야부 차차서가 샤탈 로이 소마티 코르테 모여 키라요 마네스테나.
So he didn't tell others, right, about what his plans were, but in fact he was drying all of these loaves of bread and only taking a tiny piece because he wanted to accumulate as much extra as he could so that he could go even into more isolated retreat for a longer time. And eventually what happened was he went somewhere completely isolated with those provisions that he had prepared, and it was widely understood that this particular Lama had realized emptiness, and in fact His Holiness the Dalai Lama praised him very greatly. Teo Chöpin. Yeah, so his name was Teo Chöpin Rinpoche. So Teo is a place in Tibet, and Chöpin Rinpoche was his name. So he was someone actually who, even sort of before 59, he meditated in the caves around Lhasa, and then when he came to India, he sort of continued this habit, and then he passed away in those years in exile.
So he
a lot of the queries that Geshe gets from folks are about how to kind of enhance and strengthen their study and their practice. And so one of the things that Geshe encourages them to do is to plan for when they will have a little bit more time so that they are able to maximize that effectively. And it's kind of in this sort of vein that Geshe shared this story of the Teor Chöpön Rinpoche. And of course it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to a cave, right? It doesn't have to be anything quite so dramatic, but it does mean, right, that when you have that little extra time that you're prepared so that you can seize that moment and dedicate yourself. So in addition to when we have more time, the other facet of the practice that Geshe would like to talk to you about is continuity, right? So we should have a basic practice that we are able to maintain in an unbroken continuity, so such that we are doing at least a little bit something every single day. That unbroken continuity is also really important. And also being realistic about the amount of time that it takes to achieve things. Of course, we have the story about a Sangha in his cave when he was doing the Maitreya retreat, and one of the things that he noticed was he would see a bird that was sort of flicking its wing, and slowly, that wing would make an indentation on the rock, right? So we need that kind of long-term perseverance. So at that time, a Sangha thought, the feathers of a bird are something so kind of delicate and light. And if a bird, through repeated effort, can make an indentation in rock, then definitely with my human birth, my human mind, and so forth, I can definitely achieve the goal of my retreat. So also to recognize, right, the nature of our mind that we have in the very palm of our hand that is every bit just as precious as a wish-fulfilling jewel. This is also really important. But we can think that as precious as it is, this wish-fulfilling jewel, at the moment, it's as if it is covered, like something would get covered in snow. We might not be able to recognize it. But slowly, we know, right, that as winter comes to an end and the rays of the sun manifest, that slowly, through the power of the rays of the sun, that snow will slowly melt off, and the jewel of the mind will be revealed, such as it is with our practice. Yeah. So if we can sort of dawn this sun of our wisdom gradually, we can be sure that slowly the obscurations and the unwholesome imprints can completely be cleared away. So an important clarification here that although we engage in the processes of confession and purification to clear away what is unwholesome, to clear away obscurations, we understand that the mind itself, its nature is pure. We are just clearing that which covers it. And because of the fundamentally pure and vast nature of that mind, when we apply it to the practices of method and wisdom, slowly, 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 those practices become more and more refined and can reach that state of perfection. That's possible because of the fundamental nature of our mind.
어떤 간주 논이 대시 듣도때 다 좋대래도 와스
yeah.
니가 좀 해봐서야 다투기 자와 해봐서야 어다 든디지네 다투기 대시 돼야 돼 어다 그 저지 원도 와스
And so it allows us to achieve that inner happiness through this process. And by cultivating that inner happiness, we can reach that final, lasting, and stable happiness. This is a clear process.
어다 내정에 내절 든디지야 이제 엄마 있는 체리가 다 많이容易돼 전바도 니지레서 콘솔라로 지요 말도 다 가로시고 자살세요 아레스.
So this positive aspect of the fundamental nature of the mind is simply the way things really are. And we see that even with cognitive scientists, previously they hadn't been able to maybe accept the fact that the nature of the mind is something more towards love and compassion. But in recent years, that's something that they themselves are also finding.
어다 된다 세계에 tel 로조서 세계에 tel 고자니를 다 레바도 다 리도 세도 강갈 펴도 요바도 콘도 다시 고통사와래.
Quite clearly, even, through measuring with their instruments, they can see that the study and the practice of the teachings, that this is something that at least nominally brings a healthier body and a more stable and peaceful mind, right? These are measurable things.
어다 당긴 에시아한테 콘솔로 다다 로조서 그러와스 텐데 또 아치서 그래 텐데 요아요아는 그래서 마도 듄로야 때네 문두스.
So,
당길라야 돼.
Ah.
세계 시도야 돼.
yeah.
세계야 돼.
So also to have kind of like, I guess, how should I say that? That trust, right? That as we continue to engage in the practice, we will be able to slowly, slowly clear away those unwholesome karmas and obscurations, as well as develop those positive mental qualities. That's also really important.
어다 대지트에 같이 머리 다다 좀물리도 저지나 이 고고이나 이 대지라저 하래 같이 말했으면.
And that's the purpose of the Buddhist teachings too, right? So we don't need to get stuck on whether the earth is flat or round, right? Because that's not the most important aspect of the teachings. The important aspect is that which transforms our mind.
어다 이나요 때는 손지가 기도 지가 단단 좀 말에 처리시봐 놓지 따다 걸어. 그저 지어서 그 할때 야참 버렸어.
아?
손지가 기도 전주 지가
Ale.
해봐 지가
La
좀 말에 그 세리근데 시잡아 놓지.
So Geshe was just sharing actually that there was a Buddhist, an ancient Buddhist philosopher who actually proposed that rather than flat, that the earth was like a sphere, was round, and kind of how he explained things was in line, a lot of it was in line with what modern science explains to us.
어다 대우 그 할리 같이 모두 말했더니 내가 여보러 와서 로베드 미팅이 이마 파츠 뒤제기 단다.
So Geshe cannot at the moment remember the name of this philosopher, but he thinks, although it's not the most important thing, he thinks people might be curious, so he will find the name of that philosopher next time. So somebody don't be afraid. Dave is really good at remembering, so I'll ask Dave to remind me next time, but if not, someone else can remind us for this name. We will bring it to
어다 된다 같이 모두 세가 디파도 되네 드바도 다 녀모를 지가서 강에 적기서 되게 대좀마서 지야 다 걸어서고 예땡한서 계속 첨부지레.
So also we understood that there is one quality of negativities that with training, with confession and purification, that they can be diminished and eventually completely purified, right? So that's also another important thing to remember as connected with this topic.
어다 못어서 와서 어다 세계에 때려지 다 야보지 아스파게 시와시발라다스 리도 셀헬지 그근데 대이장한서 다 헬레지 데이스.
And so having said that, by way of perhaps too much of a long introduction, we will now set the task of preparing the body and mind. And just before we go to the meditation part, because I'm aware that our voices are sometimes fainter, is everyone hearing us okay today? Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, if any problem, just message to Dave and he will help me to improve for you. So just message Dave. So let's take our body and mind and place them in a state of relaxation by bringing these four elements into equilibrium.
자치 발라 다만 자솔 파터스는 자솔 헬레 접하는지다 유머지 찬양 발레 쇼와야 붙여서
I think with this mindfulness and attention, I bring these four elements within me into equilibrium, and my mind becomes just like the ocean when the wind ceases. The waves dissolve into the surface, and there is stillness.
소소가 노를 예비 셈세아데 찜바도 자이 녀만노지 고르고 좀마 아루지 아버트리지요 소바지.
And think that through this stillness, then our inner mind, just like the sun when it is unobscured by clouds, shines forth, revealing its positive, pure nature.
니마샤 노지 세게타 시라 파지 샤토소나 디파드 드와칸가 공샤와 노지 파 샤토야 콜니 파지요 소바지.
And also think that as we dawn the mind's nature, if we are able to use this to bring forth wisdom, then that wisdom is something that can cut the fetters of the obscurations of unwholesome karma completely.
시라카제 또침보 차소나 레도니아 모노파 롱다고 토니카 디나 다 대왕 이네가 돌아파가 데토야 거까지요.
By bringing forth that wisdom, one can cut completely through karma and affliction, and in this way experience a stable, lasting happiness.
소소이나요 기보 타심바 예리나요 다 보게 대지근에서 뭐 제토야 다 거같이 뭐지 너희 소바지.
And through that, not only is one able to achieve that perfect final happiness, but one also develops the capacity to bring others closer to that.
In this
way, to be able to actualize this, we will make heartfelt requests single-pointedly to the holy beings, the Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas. So we'll begin with our prayers.
Geshe
Keji Sheba Dachomba Yontaba Zobe Sonje Reba Don Shazo Dem Dewa Sheba Jide Chemba Chewa Doye Kalo Jor Lana Meba Lado Minon Temba Sonje Choden De Bejawa Shaja Duwa La Chanzo Lo Chede Janzo Jo Temba Chomden De Keji Sheba Dachomba Yondaba Zobe Songe Sheba Don Shazo Demba Dewa Sheba Jide Jemba Chewa Nuye Kalo Jowa Lana Meba Lado Mino Jidemba Songe Choden Bejawa Shaja Duwa La Chanzo Lo Chedo Jazo Jo.
We'll do a short mandala offering. Refuge in bodhicitta.
Sonje Jido Zojo Jona La Shonje Bardo Dane Jaso Jo Dagi Chenyen Yubi Zono Je Jola Ben Sonje Jowa Jo Sonje Jido Zojo Jona Shonje Bardo Dane Jaso Jo Dagi Chenyen Yubi Zono Je Jola Ben Sonje Jowa Jo Sonje Jido Zojo Jona Bardo Dane Jaso Jo Dagi Chenyen Yubi Zono Je Jola Ben Sonje Jowa Jo.
I was asking what I was doing. I lost my cup of water. It ran away from me. So then, of course, the activities at the beginning, the motivation is very important. So then, when we talk about the activities at the beginning, middle, and the end, as Geshe often does, when all of these are complete, they are said to be able to imbue the activity with a power, the same type of power that we talk about with the four opponent powers. And when we look at the current state of the world and all of the problems that so hopelessly seem to be manifesting, we understand that the strength with which they are manifesting at this particular time are because of those unwholesome intentions at the beginning, the activities in the middle, and the completion at the end.
So when
we think about, how certain evil-minded politicians are behaving. They think that I want to kind of assert my power and ensure my longevity, and I am able to procure these weapons, use these weapons, and follow through with intimidation. And in this way, those unwholesome activities are complete in the beginning, the middle, and the end.
다 디세도 그거래 맞아. 다 안쪽에 대리 생절 강해져야 그 제도 제강가 매와줘야 안쪽 뽑아줘야 가르 그거야. 쇼바 니지 쇼주세 돈제도 비시라지 다 뽑아서네요. 슈체도 그거야.
So if we want to cultivate the opposite of that, the opposite of those unwholesome things, we need to amass the complete set of causes and conditions with the motivation, the activity, and the completion of bringing forth love, compassion, bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness.
다네서 든지지래. 다 끊어가니까 이자 끊어가세. 다 안쪽 뭐 그런 끊어 쇼주세도 쇼바도 쇼바 첨부 니지 첨부 쇼주세세는 안쪽 내가 사반다고 이자 다 세마다는 리라고 용기요 말아봤어.
So as we establish the motivation, the activity at the beginning, bringing forth bodhicitta underpinned by the minds of great love and great compassion, we have to do this again and again with determination, because we are not habituated to bringing forth these minds. It takes some effort to generate them.
ngama mo ko sakesen lilawo was senje tandorjil tawa hinayo bage nyomo sho lilawo konzre was.
So habituation is really important, right? Because we see even the animals, in terms of selfish pursuits, they're able to engage in those, protecting themselves and so forth, very well. That shows, there is a natural habituation more towards the unwholesome.
다 nyomo sho linere mari bisho ta nyomo sho rawa kombeto jima dembeto teze juze 좀 문도 때네 코바 lilawo 지가야지 코로 kombayo 아이사.
So they're able to engage in these afflicted activities, connected with ignorances and especially with anger and attachment. And they can complete activities motivated by those quite well. So even though, as we say, the minds of anger, attachment, and ignorance have absolutely no basis in reality, in the way things really are, due to the force of habituation, they are able to engage in them so easily.
다 던지지 요 비쇼 tel라 다 세계 때게 쇼 tel라 kombeto dembeto 니가 요 아이사 다 디쇼는 다 야쇼 tel라 왔어.
So our task really is to take not only the true basis that these positive minds such as love, compassion, and so forth have, and then combine that with the habituation, and then through this combination of the basis in reality and the habituation, we can go more into the direction of love, compassion, wisdom, and so forth.
다가서 봐봐 뚜샤든 대와 이자 뚜샤가 라선저 송아시 있다네 가정간서 가신도 사와스 다 드리고만 나와지.
So Geshe said, some people are wondering, well, what about our main topic? Our main topic is this confession of downfalls connected with the 35 Buddhas practice. And so we have presented, these 35 Buddhas and a mode of visualization, but there are actually several different modes of visualization. So Geshe would like to share another style of visualization with you today.
다 가정 다 라마짱가 발샤지야 다마참 과 만다와 요사레스. 가족 때다 라레레레 지시 만다와 가도 자체도 되지 만다와 되가 깔레 카와데 저기야.
Yeah, 라마짱가 베디와. And so And so firstly, there is one method that we didn't present, which should be mentioned here, which is the method of visualizing the 35 Tathagata Buddhas according to Lama Tsongkhapa's tradition. Lama Tsongkhapa has each of those individual 35 Buddhas with a different color, a different hue, as well as different implements. And so for that reason, his mode of visualization is actually considered the more difficult, the more complicated one.
다 대쇼지레스 다 가서 디레디레스 있다네 대오샤 소소를 잘 지고사레스.
And so the one that we presented was with a configuration in rows according to these colors of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, so each row matching up. So this is a quite common, often used mode of visualization.
다 뚜샤 그런 대화한다 만단게 뭘로 적은 대화 베줄로즈 치제단다 야사를 못 친다 만단 대화 뭐요사 요사레스.
Another thing to understand is that when we speak about this confession of downfalls, the 35 Buddhas practice, there are many different commentaries on it. There's a commentary by Nagarjuna. There's a commentary by Gyaltsabje. There's a commentary by Panchen Losong Chuki Gyaltsen, right? And each of those commentaries have kind of different styles.
私どももやるだスターテージとだわてじです。
And there's actually far more than what we mentioned, but these are the most commonly used ones.
我他这里北京路子去这个拍戏啥哟，这大话一呢，离老我去了，做的所以就点的几码了要不去。
So Geshe is going to present you a visualization of the 35 Buddhas according to the lineage of Panchen Losong Chuki Gyaltsen. And he feels like this might be easy for some folks. The central figure, larger than the others in this visualization, in the center, he's in the center, would be Buddha Shakyamuni.
我他老妈说别离老我去这个地方是的，我stand是大的。
Lasa, lasa.
这是那对吧？
So Geshe wants me to tell you again, this is really actually considered probably the easiest mode of visualization.
我他这做的去，第一年了，第二把多少年没让人家买的第五嘛年的去。
And then to either side of Buddha Shakyamuni, Dorje Ningpo Dang Rinchen Uchodwa. So to either side of Buddha Shakyamuni are the first two of the 35 Buddhas, namely thoroughly destroying with Vajra essence and radiant jewel. Niga. And these are both blue in color. They are both blue in color in this visualization. And then there is a configuration of 8 Tathagatas in front of Buddha Shakyamuni in this position. And those 8 Buddhas are white in color, and that's connected with the Dhyani Buddha Vairochana. And to the right of Buddha Shakyamuni, there is a configuration of 8 Tathagata Buddhas. They are yellow in color, connected with Ratnasambhava. And then Geshe said sort of it's behind, but it's more behind and above, right? So that you can see them. There is a configuration of 8 Buddhas. These are red in color. They are connected with the Dhyani Buddha Amitabha. And then to the left is a final configuration of 8 Buddhas, which are green in color, and these are connected to Amoghasiddhi. So Geshe said this adds up to the 35 nicely, right? So we have each of those 4 configurations of 8, so 8, 16, 24, 32, and then Buddha Shakyamuni with the first 2 Buddhas destroying Vajra essence and radiant jewel, and that brings our total to 35. So this is Panchen Losang Chuki Gyaltsen's mode of visualization. So let us try. First we will relax our body and mind. Geshe heard someone saying something. It's actually outside. It's not you guys. So we will settle our body and mind, and we will do our best to try to bring forth this visualization in the mind's eye. Okay. Putting aside thoughts of good or bad, wholesome or unwholesome, let us just settle into the calm clarity of the mind's nature. And as we touch the mind's empty aspect, also think there is definitely a reason to feel relaxed and so forth.
세 코로를 들은 법인 이두카도 તને ખાવા તાવા 이나 인저가 주자 매만 노지 리 아니 신하는 센제 이너레 네 이너레 가르 이나요 다 소만 노지 노안 노지 되네매 소마지.
So Geshe is actually now leading us through a settling of the mind rather than the visualization. So when we think about our mind, how it has no shape, no color, and so forth, we will see that this ground of the mind, the fundamental ground of the mind, has no pinpointable existence at all. Contemplate the mind's nature.
동맹원에 롱겐 던져놓은 갈을 보겠어. 사실 벌써 주바. 다 라와 다 시도 잘라서 가르 이나요. 다 지겠네라고.
We imagine in the space in front of us as a beautiful, jeweled ground. In the nature of a pure land, the trees, lakes, mountains, and so forth are all pleasing and give rise to bliss.
senje ke inare shashivula so bakar ina yendona tane senje tane deshi te ajma to kange te agata nes jiru me baji.
As well, the sounds of this realm, the voices of the various beings within it, they explain aspects of Sūtra and Tantra. At minimum, they are sounds that bring forth joy and bliss. There is nothing that causes disturbance.
Titin the lumbochi jegati vitani yuru pasutsupa titin the tanida awasha chatavata ba to nebitun yo sobachi.
So in the center of this jewel ground, imagine a beautiful bejeweled throne held up by 8 white elephants, upon which sits Buddha Shakyamuni, and he has the aspect of being pleased with us.
야연이 le teji shepa kondo ngomboni tane da dolje 야연이 le jire tane jalje otarba jetasi yapotajus.
And so now let's visualize the configuration on either side of Buddha Shakyamuni are destroying with Vajra essence, radiant jewel. They are both blue in color, and then there's a configuration of 8 white Buddhas in front, 8 yellow to the right, 8 green to the left, and 8 red behind and slightly above.
Rong yayala ta anto na pamani so shibiri ju senje yuzu me no bachi ta yabuchi yo sabachi.
And then as we gaze downwards, we see ourself. On either side, our mother and our father. And then behind the 3 of us, all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara, but in human form, in human aspect.
Sonji zo shipitane dujagala sinje songa te ta ngaro so somba sombo shol longa yapochi lendoga yaita tu nyemingone maside yo somachi.
And then think that Buddha Shakyamuni and the 35 Tathagatas, having comprehended our motivation, which is to follow a path of kindness and goodwill, that they bring forth the aspect of being pleased with us.
Rungje yuzu nish me kariyo shas demon tan ranila tewa chimingone deyo somachi.
And think that the assembly of sentient beings together, we meditate, both ourselves and others, on taking this uncommon Mahayana refuge, which is connected with that wish for enlightenment for all beings.
rūrū sōsō ngā sē te āte sōngjī kōrō sū nō jī sēngjī yu dzū gā tēnta tā sōngjī chā tōpa sō yī sōmpa tēmbō ngā rō sō ngā sē āchī wā rō wās te sōngjī kōrō sū nō jī sēngjī gā tēnta sōngjī gā ngō chā tōpa sō yī sōmpa tēmbō.
And think through this practice, may that I call the self, my I, achieve the same enlightenment and qualities as the Buddhas, so that I may lead all sentient beings to the state of lasting happiness. Bring forth bodhicitta.
Chandro seshi gombe talateni korosu tukane gezi pado meba ta chabamba ba noji rungru soso rungji kange gezi ma shu sombaji.
And then think the power of this refuge and bodhicitta, the assembly of Buddhas being pleased with us. They take on the nature of lights and nectar, bringing a great rain of blessing that comes to the crown and purifies that vast assembly of sentient beings.
Shedo keni yo bachi chagya kongwa noji ta keni kanga ya te sombati bado jwa.
And as that light and nectar reaches that being, like a stream of purifying water, it pushes out all of the negativities and obscurations, leaving them completely purified.
Rungi shawa sena mondi tsubini pa teni le pa lido se shawa lele yabo chwa somba.
And think, from this purification that I have achieved, then the body and mind are relaxed, are at peace.
Sosa se yabo te ta to shira kare sabeta ba ina ta she chuchu saji pusu soba chwa somba.
And think, through this meditation, I have perfectly prepared the ground of my mind to be able to sprout any seed of method or wisdom that I plant within its ground.
And
then think, setting aside any thought of my faults, today I have been able to do something wonderful to contribute to the welfare of all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara.
Okay,
So Geshe said that he hopes you enjoyed a bit of a more detailed meditation, as actually the parts of the text that we have left, they're quite simple, so they'll be easy to cover. And so hopefully you have come away from this series of teachings with sort of 3 modes of visualization for the field of accumulation, or the field of refuge as it relates to this particular practice. And so actually this practice is known by several different names, but the actual kind of proper name of the practice is the Bodhisattva's Confession of Ethical Transgressions. The Bodhisattva's Confession of, I didn't like that translation, my fault. The Bodhisattva's Confession of ethical downfalls.
Tene te shonji samba chibo nyole che reverse keba kashi tong tene sungyo te ke cha ro mares.
So then some scholars joke, well then, is this a practice that should only be engaged in by bodhisattvas? But no, of course, that this is not the case.
Ta te se ki ke che ton da manda yar keba ri chi ke sen shonji sembi domba ton de to ta tu wa shona ko je ko sa wa yiza. Te don de ta dipa kanga pa tu wa dipa kanga pa me ba so ya. Yes.
So there's different kind of thoughts on the reason for this practice being named in this particular way. One of them is that out of the various transgressions and downfalls that we have, those committed which are transgressions of the bodhisattva vows are some of the heaviest. And it is that reason that this practice is known as the Bodhisattva's Confession of Moral Downfalls.
Ta yo ri chi ke sen ta shonji zo su sa te shonji sembi ko ke tu wa sha to gen de ja ba yiza de ja.
Le konso drotang. Another take on the reason for this name is that this particular mode of confession and purification was spoken by the bodhisattvas themselves in response to questions and requests from disciples. So in this way, it's more of like a possessive understanding of the bodhisattva's confession of moral downfalls. And there's something that we can understand kind of hidden behind this explanation, right? Which is that if even bodhisattvas have to practice to confess faults related to their attachment, related to their anger, how so much more do ordinary beings like ourselves need to practice confession and purification? So, just to speak on this a little bit more, of the unwholesome karmas connected with attachment, it is said that the bodhisattvas commit very, very, very few. And even then, they are very, very light. So for a bodhisattva, the main concern would be possible unwholesome karmas connected due to anger, actually.
Nyamo resene kolaga mesene sunji gatan yares
Younger Sundanki.
sunji go nola
Yep.
shoji samba suina
Yep.
narusule de cha ina nyamo re kundo ina nyamo ras nyawa chiki
Nyomores. Yeah, maybe so good.
shoji samba ina
Yeah.
de cha nyamo izalaga mes kundo de nyamo izalaga
Okay. So another thing that you will find through an examination of the Buddha's sutras is that when we speak about attachment and anger, in the case of ordinary beings, human beings and so forth like ourselves, definitely these are considered afflictions, which we correspondingly to that designation need to work to uproot. But for the bodhisattvas, although they possess a little bit of that attachment, it is just anger that is referred to as an affliction in the Buddha's sutras when speaking of the level of bodhisattvas. And actually, in regards to bodhisattvas, attachment is not specifically spoken of as an affliction in the Buddha's sutras. So, another thing that is really important for us to understand as we approach this practice is the meaning of tungwa, which is downfall, and digpa, which I'm sorry I have to say is the word sin, because we use words like non-virtue, that's migewa. We use words like non-meritorious, that's sonam le. But digpa itself, actually, when you're speaking of different kinds of negativities, we really have to say sin in this context. Yeah, and so sorry, that's so just to be clear, that's Kedrip's aside about why I'm using this particular English word, because I know some people don't like it. You can tell me in the comments how you feel about that word, and of course I'll adjust accordingly. So Geshe said that as we approach the difference between these two, it's important to understand the difference between downfalls and sins. Those without vows are said not to be able to accumulate a downfall, whereas of course they can accumulate something that is considered a sin.
뼈나 잡아도 안에이나 뼈리라고 셔봐이나 짜 춘주 짜 춘주 지금 바탕로지 슈바이나
Yeah.
뚱아 용거 요르는 디바 마레스
Sachunchung tungna
지 슈바이나
le loso.
짜 춘주가 내가 용거 말 셔도 내가 용거 말was
Yeah. So there is an example which is given in the Vinaya, in the texts on monastic discipline, which is that if a monk or a nun were to hit a bull with a stick of kusha grass, and just tapping something with a stick of kusha grass, that's not going to cause it any pain and probably isn't going to cause it any upset. So that's the context here. That is a downfall, but it is not a sin. It's a downfall because the monks and nuns discipline forbids that, but it's not a sin in that there's not a non-virtuous intention related to that.
다요 멋지마지가 돈발레메키지가 다 등로절 슈침보 슈바이나 권내바미아 슈바이나 디바레 뚱아 마레스.
So let us assume that there's a person who hasn't taken any vows or precepts, and they hit that same bull with a thick stick, and that's going to cause the bull disturbance or pain. So that is a sin, but as the person has not taken any vows, it is not a downfall.
당아도 개념의 돈바이나를 전주선배 돈바이나 레차기지가 세세지질 때에서 내가 첨본다고 그렇게 책이 슈바이나 뚱아도 디파니까 논도요 아레스.
So this is a very important thing for us to keep in mind, those of us who have vows, not only those of us who are monks and nuns, but also upasakas and upasikas, right? People who are holding laymen and laywomen's vows, right? Because if we harm an animal, for example, not only do we have the sin of harming the animal and causing it distress, but we also have a downfall, a negativity related to a contravention of our ethical precepts. So there's a real reason that we need to highlight this.
된다 첨부 가리요서나 다 전주선배 돈발레 차기지 노징아도 전주선배 돈바든가 인자 내바슈나 전주선배 돈발레서는 야보 차로 그래 칸지 라기요 아레스 리라고지.
So this needs to be clarified here because one understanding is that if we 정주선배기 동가동 개와서나 연결슈나 야보 차.
야보 차는 노징아도 리라고지 라기요 아레스.
Usually when we give the Bodhisattva vows and encourage people in the training, we say that if there's a contravention of the Bodhisattva vows, that this can be repaired, restored, by receiving those vows again.
But
we need a clarification here. Although the vows are restored, if there was a negative karma, a sin connected with that contravention, that unwholesome karma is still there, right? It's not as if the unwholesome karma is completely cleared away automatically when you restore the vow. So, in this case, it's really important to understand that the downfall karma, right, that might have been connected with a contravention of those bodhisattva vows, this can be repaired and restored through receiving the vows again. But if that downfall was connected to a sinful deed, the negativity of that has to be confessed and purified using the 4 opponent powers. Otherwise, it can't be completely cleared away.
So the
way of how to confess and purify is extremely important, and we think about how to renew and restore vows, but we also think about negativities or sins connected with those vows. And in order to be able to clear those away effectively, a practice of the 4 opponent powers is essential.
다 소타가 돈바돈가 이네바지 이네면제 캠보도 로베근 돈을 코샤그 여마도 돈버티니 레차와이자 어때 그런도도 지레.
And then vows of individual liberation, when we contravene these, digpa chikchoyana digiro. Digpa nyempo topji gyune talsogires ro ine tungwadi nanso kempodang löpendunla. Yeah, sorry, I just want to make sure I understood this distinction correctly. So when we have these pratimoksha, the vows of individual liberation, so for monastics and also for the layperson's vows, when we've broken one of those, the sin that was connected with the breaking of that can be purified through the 4 opponent powers. But the negativity associated with the contravention of the precept, with the downfall, that has to be confessed in front of either the preceptor from whom one received it or a suitable acharya, a suitable representative of them. And that's how that has to be confessed.
다 뚜와도 디바 손지 셈바도 돈바돈 데와 코로파긴 가와이나. 하고서와
Yeah.
또 디바데 녀보도 지바로 와서 거기 와레스.
Yes.
뚜와데
Yeah.
수지 자와스도 지변도니 샤고요.
So, in fact, this principle also we can think of it in a similar way with the Bodhisattva vows. Those contraventions of the Bodhisattva vows, the aspect of them, which is the contravention of not keeping that precept, that's a downfall which can be renewed and restored through even visualizing the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and reciting the verses to receive the vows again. If that downfall was connected with a negativity, with a sin, for example, that caused harmfulness, that also has to be purified, connected with the practice of the 4 opponent powers.
어때 손지 셈베스 가르세리 손지 셈베 넘바 더 칠렘비 가르 수지 자와스도 지변도니 칠렘바로 와스.
And why is this the case? It's because when we receive those bodhisattva vows, even from a preceptor, we receive that based on the visualization of the Buddha and the bodhisattvas in the space in front of us. Therefore, that contravention, that downfall of not keeping the precept, can be confessed in front of them.
다 응하게 돈바돈 가와지이나. 다 디바기 차대이나 녀보도 지기바지 바레스.
So now the question about the vows of secret mantra, our tantric vows. So, once again, if the contravention is connected with a sinful activity, a negative deed in that respect, then we purify through a practice that incorporates the 4 opponent powers.
다 응하게 뚜이 그 차대. 쪼코이 라조고 너니 파 매워서 그 여름아도 이제도 그게 말이스.
However, the tantric downfall itself, right, that sort of negativity or that blockage associated with the downfall, for this to be purified, the downfall needs to be confessed to in front of the deities of the mandala, because it is on the basis of the deities of the mandala that we receive the empowerment and those tantric commitments.
다 오도 드릴래니 거셔도 지뚱하셔도 지하래. 다 오도 드릴 거가라고 만드는 소소소 다 레르차나 나줄래니라. 드네고 매봐서 할 거까지 알았어.
So, then how do we purify this contravention? One of the best ways is to receive the abhisheka, the empowerment of a highest yoga tantra deity again. However, if we're not able to do that, the next best thing is if we have completed a serviceability retreat, a lerung, where we've completed all of the required mantras and the fire puja, we can engage in the practice of self-initiation. And that practice of self-initiation can restore any downfalls related to the secret mantra vows.
다 던지셔서 미야 거서라 와서 다 니테시에 그냥 아주 디파토직 존재점에 넘발렘비까 디파토직 소소샤 아스니가 알아.
So why did Geshe need to explain all of these in relation to these 3 vows? Because we know that when we confess negativities, in the words of the liturgy it says, I confess each of these negativities individually. So you can think about individually through the rubric of these, 3 different sets of vows.
다 너지 뺄래라 와서라마데 빼나 쫙도도지 매고는 디세리 워주바이는 그 매도 여와매 받아고 쳐도기도 왔어.
So there is an analogy given to illustrate this. If we think about a blacksmith's workshop, when the metal is put in the fire, eventually that metal will become so heated and will become so mixed with the nature of the fire that it becomes red in color.
어다 대노지 디파도 동안이 녀도 쳐서나 뭐지 반다고 대노지 이래야 알았어.
So, again.
디파도 동안이 녀도 쳐서나.
Yeah. Yeah, 하고선.
때는 쫙 다리 매든 여와매 받아.
So when a downfall and a sinful activity are committed together, as the same action. They have that inseparability, like that red piece of metal.
다 년부터 지보 배제 돈에 내가 제바이나 하고서라 다 매는 매인으로 쳐 딩고 철류가 노지 매이 차도 매발 창으로 그랬더니 저한테 단대 대대 그러was.
So then if you just practice the 4 opponent powers regarded to the wrong thing that you did, then it's like you've thrown that piece of metal into some water. So through the coolness of the water, the fire element within that metal, that can be cooled and dissipated. But you still have the metal that's still there. The water's not going to get rid of the metal.
요 저주세베 넘만다고는 뚜이 차대 파송화속이요 소노토 딘드그레 소노토네 대바이나 요 대노지레스 지하디야 was.
Yeah, so for example, if you contravened a bodhisattva vow and you thought, okay, so through reciting this practice of the confession to the 35 Buddhas, that's just enough, right? That's a little bit like throwing the hot metal into the water.
어따 하고 잘 레비 같이 머리 된다 디바스 대야지 이니 메지니 뭐 또지 마토는 스치를 거다 더야지 문디와 스테이 이상 안 좋다 고 같이 모여.
But setting aside talking about downfalls and vows, any sin whatsoever, right? For this to be purified, we need a practice of the 4 opponent powers. So that's another important point.
어따 년부터 이제 배제 또 고가한테 또 신경도 다 가져 이제 또 이나. 년부터 이제 내가 제나. 제또 신경도. 하고서라 제 도근도 가져.
Yeah. Okay. And also, we want to familiarize ourselves with the 4 opponent powers so that we have a real feeling within ourselves of like, I know how to purify. I know how to practice these 4.
다때 배제 또는 다여서는 소자와세도 집에서 사서. 하고서 다 디바타로 그래서는 때네 그런 바지도 때네 다 그러was.
And then if one were to ask, well, who says that those 4 opponent powers are going to work? The Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. In many sutras express that. So we can have confidence in the power of this practice.
어때냐고 또 디바 여자 걸어서 말에 내 배제 또는 다로 그래서 걸어서 말이다.
So it's the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas who gave the teachings on sins and downfalls. And it's the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas who talked about being able to clear away the negative potentiality of sins and downfalls, right? So we can have that confidence. So from that perspective, actually there's a lot to be joyful about here as well. And that joyful aspect is something that we also want to keep with us about purification.
Okay,
nganso tawa dagi sem chen yongsu minpa jepe gewe tawa kang lapa.
Dilesare. Tende.
Yeah.
말아마티 또 아티니 비티 다루지다.
알레.
레체 좀 체지 domba jalоsos тоже жива.
nganso kawadu.
Yimbici 진도와.
Sorry, just trying to find where we are.
다음은 저기도 소도에서 팅밀라다.
Jimpa Tanu Dudro Kiene Sucheba. Yep. So we are at the very bottom of page 18. So at this particular part, we're still talking about the power of the basis Jangchub Sempe. And this is especially connected with the Bodhisattva practices. So it's a reminder to kind of first asking for the attention of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas of the 3 times. And so the first thing that we're going to speak about here are the roots of virtue connected with the 6 paramitas or perfections. Jimpa Tane Du Sucheba.
Shewa Tumetama Majibana Koana Koishin Yenda the Jimba Tana.
Yeah, Jimba Tana Dundro Kin.
Tradition is a Shevala Sikom Jizo Zai Giza Kola Baton Serta Senji Jimba Kalachima to Mateva Ina Chuji
So whatever roots of virtue I have created by generosity, even as little as giving just one mouthful of food to a being born in the animal realm. So that's saying even those tiny virtues, right, we're contemplating here. So whatever roots of virtue I have created by guarding morality, so that can be guarding the morality, for example, of the 3 sets of vows that Geshe just mentioned. And then one thinks about those merits that one has kept, not just from keeping precepts in this lifetime, but in all previous lifetimes.
Oh, 대지 저저지와 다 선바세바리 다게 춘바시베 게자와 고나바동 세레다 춘바시베 게자와 절다 현주 셈비가 안에 제바들 고야레 소지.
So then, dagi sangpar chupi gewa tsawa kangla. Whatever roots of virtue I have created by following pure conduct, zuparwa. So Geshe said that actually following pure conduct, but also here is keeping the practice of patience. This is understood implicitly.
And why is this
the case? Because here we're talking about a bodhisattva's practice, and one of the key practices of the bodhisattvas is having understood the downfalls of anger, one practices patience.
So this
is also a time as we recite this to reflect upon our own practice of patience, right? And then whatever practice of patience that we've done, especially when it's been really difficult, we can recollect and offer that up.
Oh,
Los.
Oh, yeah. That Geshe was Mumba GB Gates or Colabaton, the Tingens don't take it. Gets a coin, but the
Ale. And so then as we go to the next verse, whatever roots of virtue, Dagi Semchen Yongsu Mimpar Jepe, whatever roots of virtue I have created by fully ripening sentient beings, here implicitly we can also think of virtues from practicing samadhi or concentration.
This one, that dog is to the Seshi Gates or Conaba Sata, or Leva Jacher and Shida gets a coyamba.
And whatever roots of virtue I have created by generating bodhicitta, and whatever roots of virtue I have created by my unsurpassed wisdom. So that bodhicitta then made even more powerful through that concordant practice of wisdom.
What that thing is so passionate to get a limb, what you said on Java is a tangi tiento.
So then, recollection of these 6 perfections, because they are connected in this context with the mind of bodhicitta, this remains a practice of the basis. So as we know, when we speak about the power of the basis, you have these 2 practices of both refuge and bodhicitta. Yeah. So then one thinks about all the assembled and gathered and then combined together. So all of these roots of virtues that we've contemplated, kind of amassing them. I fully dedicate to the unsurpassed, the unexcelled, that higher than the high, superior to superior, highest, perfectly complete enlightenment. And here in this context we can think, I dedicate to the attainment of the 4 bodies, right? Of the Dharmakaya, of the Swabhavakaya, of the Nirmanakaya, of the Sambhogakaya, to all 4 of those bodies. So in an easy way, I dedicate to the state of full Buddhahood. So I dedicate it to the achievement of this perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. For the purpose of achieving the 4 kayas, or to make it simpler, the 2 kayas, right? The Rupa Kaya and the Dharma Kaya, the form body and the truth body. You can also think of it in terms of the 3 bodies, right? And so then here it's actually a practice of dedication, as we can see from the
다
words.
응종어와 저단 리베 소지 쪼되는 노지 요성에 봐도 저단 마셰베 소지 쪼되는 노지 요성어와 잡아 대따라주 다 저다 다다 유베 소지 쪼되는 노지 요성어와 잡아 대여도 나게 좀 요성어와 저고스.
So then, just as the past Buddha Bhagavans have fully dedicated, just as the future Buddha Bhagavans will fully dedicate, and just as the presently abiding Buddha Bhagavans are fully dedicating, just like that, I too dedicate fully.
너나 도도셔바이는 디서 손지 통제 개자간디 승어이나 녀 대저던 거기 세리아레.
So then, just as the 3 times Buddhas have dedicated their merits, the Bhagavans, so in the same way, I dedicate those merits.
노징아도 좀바바이 저다체 바통 거아지 요바 대도 지바레 왔어.
So there's a prayer that we recite that ends, may I dedicate the same way, Jambo Pauji Tar Kempa Tang. At the end of every session we recite it. This is kind of the same principle.
하여튼 디바치 다 디바 통제는 디바 통제는 소소쇼아소 서다 자와시디 쇼지 자와시도 집엔달레 딩이 디바 강가 시워즈네 파
So I confess all actions individually. So this is once again in front of that assembly of 3-time Buddhas and holy beings. It's like, we are laying bare everything, right? We are putting forth everything. Through not concealing at all. Right? Through cultivating the antidote to concealment, we have laid bare all that negativity, and in this way it has purified. That's very important. And it's really important to have this attitude of non-concealment, because that also helps us to bring forth an added regret. And as we know, regret is so important to be able to purify completely. And then we rejoice in all of the amassed merits.
And Lama
Tsongkhapa and many other great beings have stated that it is through the power of dedication that the amassed merits can flourish, and that we can even accumulate a portion of those other merits. A vast accumulation of merit which can be achieved through a minimum amount of effort. There is no practice more effective than this, than the practice of rejoicing. So all of us, Geshe said, we maybe don't engage in this practice of rejoicing because it seems too easy, right? So we don't take it seriously enough. For himself, that's how he feels. But of course, rejoicing is very important. And it is actually said that through the practice of rejoicing, we can always amass a portion of those roots of virtue. Chisha drogyo maringazo. So it is said that through rejoicing, because of course we don't share the same level of realizations as the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, we cannot through rejoicing achieve the complete power of the merits they've accumulated, but through rejoicing we can at least achieve a portion of those. Geshe was like, we're going on this, we're ending on this very positive note, and I was like, well, what about? But I was like, well, I thought some people might be waiting for the general confession, so just wanted to mention that. So once again, having dedicated all of that, then with those qualities, we approach for refuge. So I'll read the whole verse, because Geshe's read the whole verse. To the conquerors, the best of humans, who are living in the present time, who have lived in the past, and who will likewise come, all whose qualities are as vast as an infinite ocean, with hands folded, I approach for refuge. So actually it is with this attitude of keeping in mind all of their manifold enlightened activities and rejoicing that we go for refuge. So we go for refuge together with a mind of rejoicing. So in this way we completed the section of the Bodhisattva's Confession of Moral Downfalls. And so when we come to this Chishak, so we're now on the next practice, which is the Chishak, or the General Confession. This was composed by a being Nyentu Tekwarwa. Mutepa, this was composed by a being who was initially a follower of a non-Buddhist tradition. And so he had actually, this non-Buddhist practitioner, he had actually gone to the great Nalanda monastery, and his thought was that he was going to defeat the Nalanda monks in debate, because according to the customs of ancient India at that time, if a philosopher from another tradition was able to defeat the best philosophers from a different tradition in debate, they would actually have to come under his philosophy and follow him. So then this particular non-Buddhist philosopher, he was extremely intelligent and wise. And so when he first approached Nalanda Monastery, none of the monks wanted to debate with him. They were afraid. Yeah, okay. So of course there were qualified scholars at Nalanda, but perhaps none who had the sort of affinities to be able to defeat him. So when he approached Nalanda Monastery was surrounded by a wall, and so that he would be able to confront the monks successfully, he closed the doors of all the gates. He closed all the gates. Ale konso kepa di penzula lu swan. Ale. Yeah, chilula droyo mare. Yeah, suma. Re gombo. Yeah. So the monks of Nalanda, they became a little bit afraid and they didn't know what to do. So they left a letter with their Dharma protector Mahakala. And they asked Mahakala to make sure that Acharya Nagarjuna comes here, because Nagarjuna is probably going to be the only one who can successfully defeat this person. And so Mahakala took the form of a special kind of bird, and then this bird flew with the letter to South India, where Nagarjuna was abiding. With a sangha. Yeah, so they were called from South India. So a sangha initially said to Nagarjuna, actually, like, you're my teacher and I want you to pursue important things, so I actually think I can take care of it. So you don't need to go. I'll go to Nalanda. And so to check whether he would be able to answer, Nagarjuna started posing various debate questions to a sangha. Di Papa told me. Sorry. Papala, sorry. I'm sorry. For some reason I'm saying Asanga. I'm supposed to be saying Arya Deva. A few people probably caught that. They're like, what? Asanga was Nagarjuna's student? No, it's Arya Deva. My apologies. So Nagarjuna started posing questions to Arya Deva, and Arya Deva, wasn't able to answer everything. Sorry. Arya Deva, yes.
어찌전 서로 같은 게는 면도서서 던데 도바 대해서 시주디와스.
Gombolundrubi. And in fact, Nagarjuna was kind of arguing so convincingly that Aryadeva began to wonder, does he actually believe in some of these non-Buddhist philosophies? And so actually that thought would later in the story it would become an obstacle for Aryadeva. Nalanda Drotos. And so at the end, Aryadeva was able to be trained, and eventually he did go to Nalanda. And so as part of the debate, what he did, he put a very unclean substance into a glass bottle, and he started shining the outside of the bottle. Yeah. And the holder of this other philosophy who had come to defeat Nalanda, he said to Aryadeva, you're a really strange person. You have this bottle with this gross substance within it, and somehow you think by rubbing the outside of the bottle that's going to make it clean. Yes. And then his response was, but that is strange, but aren't you holding the philosophy that if devotees go to bathe in a certain river, then their sins and karma can be purified? Right? So he challenged him. And so then actually the sort of non-Buddhist scholar, he wasn't really able to come with a convincing answer for this. And he himself started to have doubts, and the story kind of continues on like this. And together with this non-Buddhist scholar, there was a particular kind of bird. Geshe said maybe like a parrot, and it was like a manifestation of his protector. Yeah, it was said to be an emanation of his protector deity. And in the story, Aryadeva sends a cat after this parrot, who was the manifestation of his protector. Yeah. So this is the preamble of this story. Loso. Sha. Ale. Chirobadi. So as the story comes to an end, eventually this non-Buddhist scholar was defeated, and feeling a bit sort of contrite, through his miracle powers, he transformed into a bird and went into the sky. Kochiyo. Kebadi chiyo chaso. Yeah, and he flew into the sky. And then Aryadeva manifested as an even larger bird that chased him into the sky. And they went higher and higher and higher and higher until the smaller bird, he was coming closer to the sun. And so the larger bird, who was the emanation of Aryadeva, he said, you don't keep ascending because you're actually going to burn yourself. It's dangerous. And so Aryadeva eventually took the smaller bird, right? They went back to the ground, and then I guess they were in their normal aspect, and sort of as his penance, this non-Buddhist scholar, he was locked in the great library of Nalanda. And he was kind of a little bit upset at being locked up. So the first thing that he did was he was like taking the scriptures from the various shelves and sort of just throwing them onto the ground. But eventually, as time went on, he became bored and he began to read what was in those scriptures. Yeah. So he just kind of made this huge mess of all of the fallen over books, but then he began to read them. Yeah, so he started to wonder eventually as time went by, what's actually said in here, and he began to study the contents. He came to one text that contained a very important prophecy, and that prophecy predicted not only Nalanda Monastery, but also that there would be a non-Buddhist scholar who came to defeat the Nalanda monks, and that a great Buddhist adept from outside would be called in to defeat him. So, seeing that prophecy, he was, of course, very impressed. And then connected with that, he felt tremendous regret at his previous actions. And he uttered what we see at the beginning of this practice, the words U, Hu, La, which is a great kind of woe is me, it says, but it's a really more like a lamentable wail which is being done. And then so based on that powerful regret and also on his study and intelligence, he just naturally expressed the words of confession which make up this practice. So this general confession is considered an important practice to the point that at all of the poshada, the monks and nuns' vows renewal ceremony, in the 3 seats and elsewhere, it is always recited 3 times as a preliminary ritual. And the ritual is said to be powerful, to contain great blessing, and hence to be very effective for purification. So Geshe said that in 1 or 2 minutes, he's just going to read through this so that you are able to receive the transmission of this general confession. So Geshe actually said that connected with all of the teachings that he gave on the Bodhisattva's confessions of moral downfalls, he's quite sure that if you read this carefully and think about it, you'll be able to understand the basic meaning. And then on page 21, it says, I who am named. So it's really good at that point in the ritual to utter your name.
소마 제바 nga지바티 되는 nga지바도 소다베 도마던 거와 쇼제스메 라바던 거와도 송화테 도세는 거와도 파도 말라 마기바 김마도 로야라 마기바도 도 주마주바시마나라 마기바도 깬조살라 네베 리지바도 도지부원 동비치부와도 바비 겐달라 거와다바도 신절라 네베 리지발라 수바 디바 먹게 수다기 지바도 지다 짜와도 연지 지발라 지서 여러 원라서 너나 토리도 답이 개서지 아주 디바도 드와세 대야테 토리라도 뭐 있고 뭐 니까가 도자. 단다게도 원한다게도. 도자 다 니까가 도자도 다도 도자 강갈했다는 내바시게 되세요.
So these transgressions which one is confessing, these transgressions need to be confessed because they can act as a block, as an impediment to achieving the higher status, that's favorable rebirth in the human or deva realms, and the definite goodness of liberation.
너나 도리도 답이 개서지지 고아동에 수고 지지비 니에두고 수 지지바 통제 라마도 전즈마 첨벌라서 뭐 쇼전아지비 수요도 주의선 바 도제도 겐드즈바노지 시행아 토로 서ng하게 라 되는이 도모데 ng하게 라 대지고텔라 다 세거보게 소노도 하다 뭐자보 차서 시제죠 domba dellos nimbo toje도 용거 아레스 도시 쇼아메 다와라 레바니 바지 마토 마샤나는 먼저로 조수.
And so in this way, in this way, Geshe has completed the recitation of that. So you have received the transmission of this general confession.
다 디파 강가 또 디파 강가 파스타 나나 소소 소마노 이 대시 대로하게 마자 나나 테니 대로하고 말해 타마타마 텐디
So one of the things that's expressed here as we come to the end, which is very important, is that through this practice of laying bare and confessing our transgressions, we can achieve true happiness. But if we conceal and we don't confess, that true happiness we seek will not come about.
디소와 오다 텐디체렌드 세이사 루루 소소를 고가 침보요 냠보 또죠 오다 조시 비다 그러고 동화데 디파 가리나 간조 고가 침보요 아이사 다 소소 세게 노노네 종아조 그거 아레스.
And so we should also understand that through these practices that have been presented, combined with the application and understanding of the four opponent powers, we have this tremendous opportunity to purify sins and obscurations, and this is an opportunity that we should not pass up.
자 체쇼 또 체쇼 때는 다 벌써 좁아 다 정주지세 시라 벌써 좁아 또 녀도 비시라 다대 뭐먹고 살아와 다대 용용용용거래라 조 대니데 다 녀보 조데레스.
And we also remember that as important as these practices are, that the most powerful way of achieving this purification is through bringing forth bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, and so we must cultivate these as much as possible.
다 다도게 대시시에 뭐가 멋진 디게 대시이나요 다 땜보지도 벌써 좁아지 땜된데와 요바다 다 시워레스.
And also to understand that this practice of purification, in addition to securing our future happiness, clearing away obstacles to that, it can also help to clear away obstacles to our temporary happiness.
오다 대이사 가빙은 다 간조 대니데 뇨래서는 도야레스.
So in this way, then, with a happy mind, we should definitely engage in these two practices. And so as we are so I wanted to do a mandala as it's the end of this teaching, but Geshe said no, we're over time and we don't have time for questions. So maybe just offer a mandala mentally to Geshe, and also thank you so much to our team who make this possible, and I'll just go straight to the dedication. Jangju Sanju Rinpoche Maje Panam Jejurji Chewan Yangba Meba Yang Gone Gonde Bewar Sho Tongni Tawa Rinpoche Maje Panam Jejurji Chewan Yangba Meba Yang Gone Gonde Bewar Sho Jambe Bao Jidar Chemba Dong Gunda Zangbo Deyon Dejin Deda Gunje Jesu Dalo Je Gewa Dida Tamjera Dungo Desu Shebe Gyawa Tamje Gi Ngowa Gongla Jodo Ngaba De Dagi Gewe Tsawa Duga Jong Zangbo Jeje Rada Ngowa Gi.
Roja kangi getsa kandi soyo ba inati telatene ta so jawa to je chaba sa cha kumaru moche okorosu gulo to wo yata oda deji so shibeta shibuto ma kandi sina kase temba to zeta jibitenda.
Through the merits that we have accumulated, we dedicate this to the long lives of, in particular, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, in particular, His Holiness the Sakya Triso Rinpoche, understanding that both of them have reached an older age, and making this prayer for their lives to be long and their health to be stable, and also for the lives and health of all qualified spiritual teachers.
No, pese chimboyo kigata, sivutumba yina tata, menayo, kaze, tatapoge, celopache mebadio apochoya.
And also, in addition to those qualified spiritual teachers, all of those who are dedicated to bringing benefit, goodness to others, may they have long lives free of obstacles.
Moge matu neo kandi sina itaka kaze tatapanjupo shenela kanga kiwochayaji.
Through these merits, may the wars, diseases, and other sufferings of this world be completely cleared away, and may those beings oppressed by this suffering once again find happiness.
zo jakkange kanga jasomba nyambala tin shwa is te kanga pa jawachin ronila somba zombochi pke rotoyachi.
Because all of these difficulties and conflicts are connected with mistaken, unwholesome minds. Through the power of these merits, may those minds be set aside, and may beings be able to give rise to wholesome minds of kindness. And through these merits, may these difficulties be cleared away, and may the sun of happiness shine equally without differentiation on all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara. Through these merits, may all of my wholesome, beneficial wishes be accomplished exactly as I hope. So I just want to turn up the volume as we come to questions.
사살 지부 동바지 와 뒤자테도 로렐 녀셔선 파 시에그 되선 드리스고 야테 간저 다 로렐 테마레렌도 타나야 버레스
Nishus labere.
녀셔선 저스는 로그 근디스 지부 동
So actually there was a particular lama, a holy being, who said that every year a commentary on the confession of downfall should be given. So at least we have covered it once this year.
사살 요아레스 소타 그라마 자치
Actually, he's still alive, this particular lama. He's living in Lhasa.
야 저와토쇼
So questions, please come. Whoever'd like to go first. Don't
Take
be shy.
Manoshi and then Clinton, and then I have one from Facebook.
Sure, sounds good.
Hi. I like hello Geshe and Kendrick and everyone.
I am Manoshi.
저갈라
Just
커마도
wondered I wondered if Geshe could speak. So we heard about downfalls and sins and being related to whether or not you have vows and so on and so forth. I wonder if Geshe could speak briefly about the benefits of taking vows, because I can imagine one could wonder, well,
Yeah.
why would I take a vow then if this could lead to further difficulties, you know?
Yes,
Having
okay.
broken-
Yes, okay, yeah, no, Manoshi, excellent question. I will translate this to Geshe. And just related with vows and sins, I quickly glanced at the comment. I saw that nobody objected to my use of the word sins, so I'm going to assume that it's okay that I use that word in this context. Am I right? Okay, yeah. Kochua diretua. Ganso di digpa dong tungwa nigayores, rwa. Dene di samlo tangna chichana o notru chikla tene digpa dang tongwa niga yongires dene mikasha dompa lenya pento mentuas dene dompa lenya gipeyen tet shegore mato konso shegiresa. Yeah.
야, 다 때도 때도 세지면 뭐 시차오다 오래 돈발레기나 돈발레기나 가서 겨 맞아 비깔아요. 그러게 이거 그게 니바주라 되게 알았어.
So one of the benefits of the vows, Manoshi, would be that from taking the vows, even if we just take the vow and don't engage in another virtuous action, but merely from not transgressing that vow without any particular effort, we accumulate virtue. So we can accumulate virtue without kind of great effort, merely through just having that vow.
다 돈바 다 겨니네 줘봐 이나도 다 단다 겨와지 마도라고 만드는 겨와 자토 보게 라야 그런 니바지 요 알았어.
The other thing is that in terms of the virtues, the merits that we accumulate, if they're also connected with the practice of maintaining the vow, that virtue, which might be just sort of one increment, it becomes increased exponentially due to the power of the vow.
야 대어 데모레스 자 빼나 존지선비 돈반다고 질레자소나 소소 겨와 춘주지 마도 센제질 다 칼라지 마도 떼지 마도 맞아봐 이나요 센제 요zul라 때는 니빨 소노 또 먹기는 라긴디 왔어.
So Geshe would also say, when we speak about the Bodhisattva vows, right? It's said that if we give even just one spoonful of food to an insect being, that because of our Bodhisattva intention, the merit of that is increased exponentially, almost like we had given that spoonful of food to all sentient beings. So that's another important aspect of the benefits.
다 대지 관계 존재성이 돈비고 다 돈발레비 배치래.
Yeah. So these are all connected with Manoshi's questions. These are all particular benefits to receiving the Bodhisattva vows.
다 니빠 체주도 요하라. 와서 다 존재성이 돈바스는 하종에 니빠 체와 있다. 니 그바 이나라 조정로와 이나라 소노치는 마도나요. 다 대디 니빠라테 겨와 잡아마 바레세.
Due to their connection with bodhicitta, the Bodhisattva vows are particularly powerful. When we look at the teachings on their benefits, it is said that without applying particular effort, one who maintains the Bodhisattva vows is having a constant rainfall of merit while sleeping, standing, and walking. In other words, one is accumulating merit at all times.
다 대지 관계 존재성이 돈비고 다 배되래.
So these, connected with Manoshi's initial question, explaining it from the perspective of the Bodhisattva vows.
제마도 간주 깔레자네 겨와 릴라 워치면도 와스 코코 메인디 템보치 거 요하래.
So you could actually look at it from a different perspective, which is that without the supporting, increasing power of the vows, it would be very hard to collect vast merits, because the vows allow us to collect merits in a very vast way. They magnify, in other words. So explaining from the point of view of, in Geshe-la's opinion, the very best vows to take, which are the Bodhisattva vows. Did that answer you, Manoshi?
Yes, quite well. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anybody else? I see a couple hands, but I can't see whose they are. So
Go ahead, Clinton.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Venerable Kedrup, and thank you, Geshe-la. My question is, first of all, I'd like to say that we're very fortunate at the moment here in South Africa, because we have a very highly respected Nyingma Lama who's visiting by the name of Chamtrul Rinpoche. And I attended a teaching of his on Friday, and he said almost exactly what Geshe-la said now about focusing on one particular practice and mastering that practice. So my question to Geshe-la is, although I've received quite a number of highest yoga tantra empowerments, and I've got my mantra commitments that I do, and I've got my 6-session guru yoga that I do, the only sadhana that I really feel I'm able to really do with any semblance of efficacy and success is the Ganden Lagyama. And I would like to ask Geshe-la, is that sufficient? Is that a sufficient sadhana practice to focus on?
Yes.
In addition to the commitment that
so then again, you're welcome, Clinton. Gain the Tambo Labia dan Consultanda Australia the Nyingma gi Kushuchi Chamdro Rinpoche Labia dan Dabo res Roa Chirta Nganso Mambo Chik Yeres Yine Nganso Perna Drup Top Chik Drotang Chik So Sini Di Halepe Shibtra Chene Drogres Mato Nganso details Drona Jebuyapo Yongire Mendua Dene Di Samlotana Ko Gelu Ginanglola Lame Gyugi Wang Mambo Shutsares Yine Druptap Dinso Druptap Chatsangwa Nanglola ya Gandan Nagyama Mato Nyamlenche Tugi Mendus Di Dapo Yina Dene ko Ngak Sayagi Kelendi Nyarna Tundruk Di Yapo Nyarna Damsig Dinso Nyarna Dene Gandan Nagyama Chikpo Drone Druptap Di Chipo Yina Digire Besa. Kusum nam ke
Mare Gadi Lajama Tat Bimi Tate Halevi Yabodres Turunde Gadi Lajama de Tenisma Sana.
Yeah.
Akosara Kale Dita Chipena Dita Niji Yashu Chingol Dotona. Akosara Kasalonche Dita Kachimores.
So Geshe-la said, first of all, he rejoices, that you've been able to maintain those commitments, that you are reciting the 6-session Guru Yoga, and that you are reciting the Gandan Lagyama, and that, that's helpful for you. However, he would encourage you to recite at least one highest yoga tantra deity practice for the specific reason, once, even if short, one highest yoga tantra sadhana, for the specific reason that taking the three bodies into the path is such an important practice.
메트르도 자나 자야도 텐데 요아르와스 다이나 이다 뉴뉴지 오 거기도 지금도나
Tundruk 인지민지 교육을 말했던 거.
미미쇼 거와스
쇼거라.
메트르도 자오게나 자야도 요아르와스 그솔로지도 간가
Yeah.
다이나 이다 지 뉴뉴지 칼칼노나 테즈 요아가세
So there are ways of incorporating the taking the three bodies into the path in the context of the 6-session Guru Yoga, but they're very abbreviated. And so Geshe-la really feels that even if you're just doing the very shortest sadhana possible, doing one deity's highest yoga tantra sadhana every day would be really beneficial.
담보네 지바 먼저 먹어와치 담보 디디지 다 디바치 거데 데스 진도나
It doesn't need to be the long one, but just if you're choosing one concise sadhana out of the various deities you've received, one concise sadhana to practice daily.
언지전도나 난저만도나 대촌도나 가리나다 다 뉴뉴지 그 돈이 지서대서노 도나 트렌테 팅아치네 야가멘도스
Doesn't matter so much whether it's Yamantaka, whether it's Chakrasamvara, Vajrayogini,
Mushitana.
Guhya Samaja, or whatever, right? Assuming that you've received initiations into all of those, it actually doesn't matter which one it is, but there should be one abbreviated sadhana that you're trying to practice the three bringings with regularly. That would be Geshe-la's opinion.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Clinton. Next question.
Hello, yes, we have one from Facebook. How can we best restore our vows, Vajrayana and Bodhisattva, if we've not been able to practice properly due to illness, for example?
Yeah, nganso nawa natsa la tene nyamle ma chena dene halepe nepa chana dene nganso jangship sempe domba dang yang sanga ki domba yapo nyarmi tuba dapo yana nawa la tene domba yapo nyarmi tubna dene yangyer soya tap yaksha kareresa.
네 메타 때도 다 요아쇼세나 뭐도 빼나 나와도 된디나 소소 노는 존재세베 도마 용용래 되는 뭐 도저 다 버거 지니면저 가르헬레 테스테다 그래서 그거 다 된디제 요아라스
Yeah, so Geshe-la said like not a particular special practice to advise here, but trying to make the practices that are there as concise as possible. So for example, a really short verse to renew the Bodhisattva vows, and just in a relaxed way, even kind of in a resting position if you have to, at home, just doing kind of that shortest verse, but really trying to renew the Bodhisattva vows, for example. That could be very effective.
빼나가도 드리다 디세메에서 레마서마다 라체 림보세 라친디와스
Yeah.
코체텔 나야메 코로 디세 타마 말레 바다
Yeah.
가디나 키보세 되게 키 콜 게와 되게요 말이스
So, and also to see that illness doesn't actually have to be an obstacle to our Dharma practice. It can actually be helpful from some perspectives. We didn't have time to talk about it, but in the text that we've been looking at, it mentions not wanting to be reborn as a long-lived deva, as a long-lived god. So they have a very long lifespan, relatively free from illness. But because they don't have any of those worries about like we have with our corporeal form, right? They can never bring forth the wish to practice Dharma, right?
하고서래 어떤 간조 나와도 다그 거의 내서 뭐 지시고 보게 누구요 아이자 대라 때는 뭐 보게 아버지나 그걸 두를 진도야지 알았어.
As human beings, we know that we're going to encounter illness. We know that we're going to encounter lots of different upsets within samsara. And actually, when viewed in a certain way, this can actually enhance our practice of the Dharma.
당에 두께다시 등에 근데 좋아요를. 야야 오늘 다 두지 마시고
So Geshe-la said there's a story that he wants to tell with this, but also he asked me how many hands were up, and I saw at least 5. Well, it was Facebook, Geshe-la. Yeah. So I know it was Geshe-la said, did the person get the answer? So hopefully they'll respond on Facebook and you can let Dave. But just to be really clear, like renewing the Bodhisattva vows, for example, and the practice of confession, this doesn't require physical exertion, right? Like even if one is unwell, this is something that one can do mentally. So let's go to the next question. Yeah.
So if I may, I had a question as well. The answer will probably be quite heavy, but my question is, comparing having sins in the mental continuum and having downfalls in the mental, what is a karmic manifestation of, let's say one has purified sins through the practice of confession and the 35 confession Buddhism, but one still has the downfalls of Hayasuga Tantra because of not having received initiation again yet, or not having the ability to do self-initiation. What is the karmic result of having downfalls, even though the related sins have been purified?
Yes. No, important question, but yes, indeed heavy. It's an old-time religion question, I think. Let me see what Geshe says. Nganso di digpa dang tungwa niga res roa ane perna nganso nyempa top jidro na dene nganso digpa denso jang tu gires ne tungwa jang tu gyomares dene chichena chiwa di tes jiko sapo redua ine nganso perna sanga gi tungwa chikyona ane nganso sam lerung matsar genchik wang yangar shumitu bachik dene tungwa de la tene Jebu dungel kandes tapochik levgiresa. I always smile in awkward moments. Sorry. Again. So Geshe said you can tell from the name of what we call this thing, which is a downfall. So that gives you the answer. But he's joking. But really, it depends upon the heaviness of that particular transgression. That really would have to be considered. So downfall generally means to fall down to the unfortunate states of existence. If we look at the etymology of the word, that's what it means, actually. But of course, it's possible to commit a sin which is so powerful that it causes us to fall down into the lower realms as well. And that wouldn't be with a vow transgression, right? Just through the power of that negativity, it would also be a fall down.
But
Geshe would say that he can't answer this unequivocally because it would depend on many things like the intention, the particular downfall involved, and so forth. But generally we could just say the heavier it is, the more likely it would be to lead you into an unfortunate state of existence. But then if it's medium, then it would be something, less serious. And if it's a lighter transgression, it would be something less serious. Yep. Yeah. Hakoson shiwa. Yeah.
Duchi nyuma ndo nujires. Duchi nyuma sere yugu jipati ya.
Ale.
Nyuma. Pena chipai ji na. Chok pai.
Chet pipe.
Chok pai.
Loso.
Chok pai ji na.
Yeah.
Duchi tuno roso na.
Druk chik sana?
Drill.
Snake.
Yeah.
Ale. Loso.
Tuno roso na.
Loso.
Kon roso yona roso chi yona man roso chi wa teni ma dio manes.
So when we speak about a root downfall, whether with regards to the Bodhisattva or tantric vows, a root downfall is explained a little bit like a particular pipe or a hollow bamboo stake. And so if you put a snake into that pipe or into that bamboo, it only has two directions it could go, either up or down.
하고서래 어짜도 세는 여바 지고 잡어서 할레비 잡고 잡어레스. 자도.
Then a pipe didang drawa karedu satung.
세시오 요나 야한도서 지도 요나 만도서 마도 만두아스.
Ale.
자도레사 소나 자도이나.
Loso. Yeah. So when a downfall is committed, yadroya kandesures. So when we talk about a downfall, if there's only two places that we can go, up or down, with that analogy, we understand that it's something that will lead one downward. Yeah, so this is an example you find, right, in the various scriptures about these vows, and it's given using this bamboo and the snake as an example. So a root downfall, and as you know, you have to have a lot of factors in place for it to be a root downfall. That does have serious consequences, no matter what scripture you look at. But of course, the subsidiary vows, for example, like we talk about, like a downfall that's not a complete root downfall, and as well transgressions of the secondary vows. Of course, that's not going to be quite as heavy.
다 자세전 내려서 알론소 타지야 계제요 아마 그런 예바 지고 자주라 되는 거그래스.
But Geshe doesn't think that he's in a position to be able to kind of dictate to you like, yes, you're definitely going to go to the lower realms if you do this, because with each action there's a consideration and there's many factors and intentions that are connected with it.
라도 말시와 이나 연락이 빨라 되는 거로서 다 지고 통근도 와서 바지 담다가 대하대 어떤 거그래스.
And we also know, like, you know, even if we're born in a human realm, so say you commit a downfall and you're born in the human realm or even in a deva realm, right? There can still be suffering that is manifesting that is a result of those transgressions.
가셨던 로이나 멀기 받더니 뭐 용근도 와서 대지고 거룩하게
So like you might look in this world and you can see, like, you know, there's some pets that get treated better than human beings. And that's like kind of sad, right? But then karma and how that plays out is connected with that, right? Yeah. So karma is an extremely profound topic and yeah, very, very difficult to penetrate. Yeah, yeah.
maybe
Chemalep, how yeah, yeah.
Shemale chembo chimbo tomak sagiwares.
Ale.
Kitemi tonde tri kita dera was kotane kol chembore shupa yare.
Yeah.
Ina imbo tomal mi yamare se yare.
Yeah, yeah.
Deji khosando kundu was. Kitni sonoton lendel peta chimochi sono kone. Tene zute tene koloro halivit pitabu chasores.
So observing how this karma plays out can be something very transformative. There's a story of a great Lama who was in retreat. And as he was doing his practice, a moth landed on the table. And this particular moth ate insects. And he saw that the moth was attacking an ant that had come to its table. And he thought, you know, this is such a sad situation because they say that ants are blind. The ant is much smaller than the moth. The moth can fly and the ant cannot. What would be the reason for the arising of such an unfortunate situation? This caused him to deeply contemplate karma and subsequently to engage in the study of the Lamrim, and he became a very realized Lamrim practitioner. So from seeing that instance, right, it actually became like fodder for his practice to kind of increase in its power. Yes. So that's a powerful condition, right? Seeing how this karma plays out can be a powerful condition for realization. Next question.
We did have one in the chat before we go to Carol, which is, can you restore your tantric commitments through the practice of the 35 confession Buddhas?
Yeah. Nganso sanga gi nyepa denso tungsha gi gyune yangar soya yorebes.
Tusha gene senata tu soji songarsi ta tindone ta shonje se bedombale.
Yeah.
Ta tendizona uta te
Mare sanga.
Sunga domba ro senata te chibogre marwas.
Actually, the answer would be no, because it relates to the difference that we talked about it being able to purify the sin and being able to purify the downfall itself. So if there's a sin connected with it, definitely it can purify that. But in terms of the imprint left behind of the downfall, then because the 35 Buddhas is not like the direct opposing factor to the transgression of the tantric vows, it cannot be considered complete to be able to do that. Yeah. However, another thing to be mentioned here, if one becomes very skilled and develops a powerful understanding of emptiness, right? That understanding of emptiness is actually said to, when it's refined enough, be able to purify that tantric transgression.
Tiwa rodo korope taya kecha rodo yo marite tenda tiwa tiga leka cheya me baso ro.
So the realization of emptiness would be so powerful that although it's not a direct antidote to the downfall, for example, like receiving the initiation again, so we can't say that it clears the downfall away, but the purificatory power of the realization of wisdom is so substantial that the downfall is rendered insignificant. We could look at it like that.
Pena nyeti kashi ke tumbo dipato chimbo tene sa. One konzo chilek ta koron jeba shi tumbani go tene zone ta dachimi kombo to so na.
Yeah.
Tiwa ko sho amandu na.
Yeah.
Tiwa ko leka cheya yo marite. Tiwa ta bi mid to yo mare kenza.
So it is said, like, also with the hearers, right? Those individual liberation practitioners who may have committed very heavy sinful activities, but they later bring forth emptiness, right? Because they did not confess the specific downfall.
Seno tumbani ke tu shira la tiene. Tiwa ta ndo gre ta bi mid to yo mare.
So the power of that downfall to bring forth a suffering result, it is kind of rendered immobile, but it is still called a downfall because it hasn't been confessed with a specific antidote. Sorry, I hope that's clear.
Te ale mundias mi mato na mato. Tiwa ta sen disar.
Yeah. But Geshe said, like, in that way, it's in that way, kind of at that level, you don't have to worry, right? Like, there's still this abiding that's kind of a downfall, but your realization is so powerful that it can't harm you.
Ajindawan tani yo. Tiwa ta ju ta me mato. Tiwa ta ju.
Yeah.
Tumani la tiene. Shira la tiene.
Yeah.
Ta bi mid to go mare.
So in the Vinaya, it also says that through the power of the realization of emptiness, the negative potentiality of the downfall is defeated. But the word downfall, the mere word downfall, remains, something like that. So that is the power of wisdom, right? And that's often why we call wisdom the king of practices. So next question. I'm assuming, so that was from a comment, so I guess we can't ask if the person got their answer, but please let us know if you didn't. But let's move on to the next question.
Hey, Carol?
I go? Okay. Hello, thank you so much for this wonderful teaching.
You're welcome, Carol. Go ahead.
Right. Well, I had a question before the class, and I think it's been answered, but I kind of want to put it on the table at the same time. Do we need a particular kind of purification for having chosen bad teachers and developed a lot of sectarian pride? Now, Geshe gave this extraordinary story of the philosopher in the library and the anger and that really seems to say that's a wonderful way to purify this. But I wondered if Geshe Sonam had any extra things to say about that, if there's anything in particular, because it's such a yucky kind of thing to cope with. So thank you. Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put that question. Nganso perna nganso ngama halepe churi tsapo gi lama ola dapo chana roa dene korongso churi tsapo gi tawala tene nganso kandesla kure chugyun ijendag denso tongchung chegi duas ane nganso churi tsapo damka cheya gi churi tsapo yimpe gegen damka cheya gi ledi dikpa kandes chik jango gi dus dene nganso di uhula gi lama di kola di dabo chiko son karinsana ko halepe churi tsapo res ine di kola sheya agenda yubesa.
Churi tsapo chaya di pat tene.
Yeah, nganso lama mambo nangola nganso churi tsapo chik damka chene roa di chitang dikpa re diwa karinsana nganso miduk che chik dabo chik lama chine roa dene di dikpa kandes chik jango gi re diwa stabo chik.
Ta ta ne zite ta pake shuri me pike ta pake.
So, in this very particular example, Geshe would say that the antidote is something that directly addresses the cause. So the antidote in this case would be to cultivate a non-sectarian viewpoint as much as possible and to rejoice in those who are holding a non-sectarian viewpoint, and dedicating that purification to the particular transgression you mentioned. And really to remember Lama Tsongkhapa's viewpoint when we recited at the end of the foundation of all good qualities, may I always find perfect teachers and cultivate all of the paths and so forth. To also cultivate this as an antidote, understanding that non-sectarian intention.
Yeah.
But also to keep in mind that even if the Lama was sectarian, right, to not have a completely one-sided view, because we may still have received some benefit from them. So not to solely focus on the faults and talk about that, but also to look at the qualities. That's also important.
Yeah.
So Geshe said that actually, as we come to the next series of teachings, right, we're going to be looking at several texts that talk about the relationship with the spiritual teacher. So we'll come to more discussion of these points.
But
one thing that needs to be clarified here is that whether a teacher-student relationship becomes beneficial or not is a 50-50 responsibility. Sometimes it seems like it's only all put on the student, but whether a student-teacher relationship becomes wholesome or not, 50% of that is due to how the Lama approaches it, 50% of that is due to how the student approaches it. So that's very important. And so, because the role of the teacher is so significant, then there's a lot of ethical restraints connected with being a teacher. And in fact, if the teacher is following those ethical restraints correctly, then they go to consult Sūtra di Sungna. So when the Lama is able to maintain those ethical practices correctly, and the student is able to maintain those ethical practices correctly, then there's really no need for a serious problem. There may be some misunderstandings, but there won't be any serious problems. So both sides have to guard their ethics. That's the key. And also to understand that in terms of all of the ethical practices and stages of the path that lead to the state of enlightenment that were spoken by the Buddha did not speak anything that we cannot practice. So we have to understand that as we develop our capacity, we will be capable of practicing all of this. The Buddha didn't give teachings that are impossible for us to keep in order to discourage us. The Buddha wouldn't do that. The Buddha gave his teachings to help us become happier, and he gave teachings that he knows that we are capable of, if not now, at least in the future, being able to practice. But of course, sometimes we might get discouraged because we know that in the scriptures, things are often taught from the point of view of the highest level of practice. So Geshe does understand that can be, discouraging sometimes. So hopefully we address the question in there somewhere.
Perfect advice. Thank you so much.
No problem. And I see that we still have more hands, so whoever would like to go next.
Hello.
Hey, Martha, go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Hi there. Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't hear you at first, but I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Well, I was thinking that in Buddhism, it's everything about the mind. So, but the mind is maybe like the cell phone that always you have something new, you can put more information, you take out information. I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. So,
No, I understand your example.
So also every day, well, we have all these projections. Everybody, we see we are doing faults. We have problems with other persons, and this is a projection, and we need to purify. That's the word, purify.
Yeah.
And so I think, entonces, so at the end, the life, it's about purification, because this is every day. And for example, as you mentioned about the bird, this story about the bird and the other bird that goes very high. Also in the indigenous, in the native people here, they also transform into animals. Right? So I think it's a kind of levels of a spirituality that also we can do, but also in that example that you said about this other little bird, it needs also purification. So we are always need purification. So life is about purification. Is that my question? Life is about purification. Thank you.
Okay, I think I got it. Yeah. Nganso mitse tsorwa di Deepak Janya Gichedu Samlo Tangna Digire Base Karinsena Chirtang Nganso mi dabochik Nganso mobile cell phone dabochik yeres roa cell phone kadine netso sarpachik levgi yeres tene Nganso netso sarpa denso sem nanglala sabun dabochik tabgi yeres roa ane tene dela tene Nganso mi dang mi tumba chagi yeres nyotra dabochik chagi yeres tene kadine kandisla gre sabun duksha denso yangsi sem nangla dabo sel taugire duas dene di dabochik samlo tangna dene Nganso mitse chatsang ginyamlen dipajangya rebes karinsena kadine roa duksha sarpachik sone Nganso kadine sarpa ne Dipajango gituas ane drung di chiu denso ni nankala pine dene samsam mirik tampo konso yang mi konso semshin la giro tang tu gire duas tets tobo yena dene chiu chung di ko Maryongo res karinsana koran lekatso ko Dipajango gire duas dene Nganso di dabores Nganso lekatso di resa
Mara Nganso lekatso te isono to ya martas no wayina So Geshe
would say that the purification of unwholesome karma, the purification of negativities, is extremely important for Buddhists, but he can't even really say that it's the main task. It's important, but it's not the main thing. So, of course, when we have time, with as much of a high quality practice as possible, we confess and purify our negativities, no question. But our main task, our life practice, is actually to bring forth wisdom. The reason for this is because, like you said, there's no end to the unwholesome, to the negative potentialities that we are accumulating. So there's no way that we could purify everything and reach like a stage of completion like that. However, the practices of method and wisdom can reach a stage of completion and perfection. And for that reason, it is extremely important to practice those. In fact, all of the problems that you mentioned, Martha, yes, they are related to our negative karmas, but on the ultimate point of view, the suffering and problems we experience are due to our inability to see the ultimate mode of abiding. In other words, to see the way things really are. When we are able to bring forth the unmistaken wisdom that sees that, all of these projections, problems, and sufferings will fall away.
다 디파테스 마주나 시도 야포테 아시에그리 바로 짠람다 바제존에라. 시도 야포지 아시에그리와나.
Yeah.
하고서라.
하고서.
어따테 짠람다 고네바시긴데 와스.
Ale, 하고서.
어테지 밥 메와서 가이다 디파우테 요그요 아레스.
Ale. So, but of course, to sprout that wisdom, we need to prepare at least a little place in the ground to plant that wisdom seed, to plant that seed of method, and to have it sprout and grow. So you can think of a ground that's maybe been contaminated with salt. You need to clear away that salt to make a place to plant that seed. But you don't want to try to remove the salt from the entire ground, because actually that's not realistic.
체가 되지 매번 만서나.
So like even if you get rid of like the biggest pile of salt, there's still going to be little tiny grains of salt elsewhere in the thing. There's no way you can remove every single grain, yeah? So hopefully So purification extremely important, but mainly our study and meditation even more important. Because we need to bring forth that wisdom. So hopefully that answered Martha's question. Is she still there? Okay. Come back to us, Martha, if it didn't answer your question. But let's go to the next person then.
Go ahead, B.
Hi, Geshe. It is always a delight to hear your teaching. And the translation. I would like to actually apologize ahead of time if anything I say should be offensive to Geshe. I always find it difficult to know what is right or wrong exactly when it relates to, in terms of how I think about a teacher and the Buddha's teaching. It just so happened that this morning I was listening to another teaching by a Nyingma teacher where he was explaining, giving a commentary on the vows. He started with the root vows that we can violate.
The Bodhisattva vows?
I forgot. I missed the beginning. So
No problem. Okay. I'll just translate.
One of which is to not something about the guru. I think not to say badly things about guru. And the second.
Yes. This is the tantric vows. Yep.
The tantric vows.
Yep.
Okay. So in any case, just to be more general, one vow say that we shouldn't do anything against what the Buddha's teachings say. So, for example, if we are a Vajrayana practitioner, we shouldn't think that we do not keep the vows of the Hinayana, because they are all Buddha's teaching. So my questions more specifically is that in relation to the guru, I have a lot of trouble on how to think about this thing called crazy wisdom. Specifically in relation to some of the scandals or controversy that have happened relating to some Nyingma teachers and also Gelug teachers. And in relation to the Buddha's teaching, while the Buddha had 3 turning of the wheels, and there are also many lineages, and also within the lineages, there are many differences. So how do I think about all of this without incurring so-called some kind of downfall? While I am also wanting to, or rather needing to, determine for myself which is the correct view. So because it comes down to that, the correct view. But there are different people talking about different views.
Can I get your name again? Sorry.
D.
Sorry. Yes. So because this is the second or third time I've seen you, so I like to learn people's name if I can. So I'm just gonna put back the question as I understood it before I translate for Geshe, and you make sure that I understood correctly. So it sounds like there's kind of two things that you are struggling with as it relates to vows and relating to the spiritual teacher. So one of the things that's emphasized here is not denigrating the spiritual master, right? And so then I think, like, connected with that, how are we supposed to process things that some people might refer to as crazy wisdom, but that on the other hand seem like pretty serious ethical transgressions? And, you know, certainly we've seen that in many different schools of Tibetan Buddhism, Nyingma, Sakya, Geluk, whatever. So how do we kind of understand that, and how do we kind of understand, and how does that relate to crazy wisdom? And then secondly, as there are so many different lineages and teachings, even within the Buddha's formulation of the three turnings of the wheel, some of them are contradictory. So how does this not criticizing in terms of how it relates to the vow of not abandoning or denigrating Dharma, how does that relate to how we should understand and be critical about various different presentations that we find within the teaching? Did I understand you?
Yes, by
Okay.
that's
Okay.
the gist.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, sorry, because it was, I just want to make sure I got the complexities there. So, di chua ni dua, then ko tambo di gongda sori shugi yes, di kushap mepa gi chua dabo yena ko ngene di korangi kunong yomares. Yine ko nganso dompa gi ko la keche shegi yotsang, then di mashe rangshe dabo chigre duas. Then nitsu tambo di nganso sanga gi dompa nanglola, dene tambo di dabo chik lama mera tangya di tungwa tso dabo chik res. Dene di kande samlo tango res, karin sena dinsang zambo ling nanglo la ya lama mambo chik ningma yena, geluk yena, kaju yena, koronso tsutrim dang gelwa gi netso mambo chik sone, ruwa, dene mi kashe di sherab nyomba gineso dabo chikyo ngaso drup top ki shirab nyomba dabo chikyo res. Ine konso tsutram dang gewa dabo chikyena di sem nangola kandes chik samlo tango res. Di chik che. Nipa di nganso dompa nangola yang che mera tangya di tungwa chambo chikyo res. Rwa. Ine perna chugyunji sakya gelu nima kaju koronso tawa mendrawa chikyo re. Ane sangye gi sung nanglola yang nganso di kolo sum chikyo res. Ane kolo sum gi nanglola ya samsam gelwa ya res. Dene di dakta res, di dakta mares lagoya chikre duas. Dene di che pangya dang ma soya kandes chik sogo res. Chua nidin so dua.
아니 디와 다 도마디 가르서 시였어.
Tamba di lama mera matangya ane sherab nyomba dabo chik lagire duas. Ine dinsang zamboling la lama mambo chik konso tsutrum dang gelwa chik sogi res. Dene di kandes samlo tango res.
말다 때 소속을 라마 때 차와 있는 요다지레 마도 라마 때 매바 있는 공연에서 되시자 주로 왔었죠.
So the first thing to clarify with regards to the ethical transgressions of certain lamas is, if you have not made the decision to rely upon a particular lama as a spiritual master, then criticizing ethical lapses is not wrong. Right? If you've researched carefully and you find that there's an ethical lapse, it's not a fault to say that there's an ethical lapse. But you know, we really have to have researched it carefully and know that there's been an ethical lapse through like an investigation or something. If it's just like we maybe heard from somebody who somebody heard that maybe, then also you have to be careful, right? Because you're not sure that that lapse has occurred. But if a particular lama has engaged in conduct that you want to protect people from, and they've committed a fault, if you have never relied upon that person as your teacher, there's actually not a fault to criticize. Yeah. Of course, if you've relied upon them as your teacher, then you have to be more careful. And that's why Geshe always tells people to approach the teacher-student relationship slowly, carefully, right? Not just on charisma, to think carefully. This is why that's so important.
아고서와 다 되니 때 참내라 노다더니 뭐 통근도나 다때 소소 돈요 대아래 레레 대아래 마도 아진다만 시에나도 뭐냐
Yeah. So if that happens, right, then we if we've relied on a teacher and there's an ethical lapse, right? We recognize the ethical lapse, but also we understand the drawbacks of continuously denigrating or disparaging them, right? Because that's not good either. So if we've relied on them as a spiritual teacher, we have to maintain a little bit more equanimity as part of this picture. That's very important.
다 되게 다 라마 피다 보면은 소소 때 차요나 라면 데 드가르자 치게 개와지나
Yeah.
뭐 개와쇼는 이거 더 구마레스 저
But another clarification is very important to be made here, which is that if a teacher advises you to do something that is against your sense of ethics, you don't have to do that just because they're your guru. You're allowed to politely refuse. This is so important to clarify. We don't have to mindlessly do what our guru tells us to do. We are allowed to politely excuse ourselves.
때때가서 말다 가와이나 야 유치문을 요아래
And
대실레가레
this is not Geshe-la's matter of opinion. This is stated in scripture after scripture after scripture.
아고서와 다 게이쇼지 임바지 소소 더 터고 문도나 더 터고 문도에서 요아시 그거 요아레스
And even if it is a virtuous thing that our guru is requesting us to do, if it is beyond our capacity at the moment, with respect, we could politely explain that it's beyond our capacity at the moment. If we do that, it does not damage the relationship. So that's also important to clarify.
다 소소 더 터고 문도에서 다는 라마 구마츠나요 소소냐 바퀴 말 라마 걸어기냐
And if we're not able to do that task, either because we lack the capacity or because it's not ethical, if your lama scolds you, the lama accumulates a fault for getting angry. You do not accumulate a fault for politely explaining why you couldn't do something.
텔로메냐 바 말다 시워레 녜테 다치리오스
Geshe-la can say, based on his studies of the scriptures, in that particular instant, there's no fault from the side of the student. He can say this with confidence. So, especially when it comes to if a lama is advising us to engage in an unwholesome activity, how could it be that we're somehow wrong for refusing to do that? Of course not. There's not a fault there. So hopefully that clarified a couple. But Geshe said that in terms of the things that we see with spiritual teachers engaging in harmful actions, in particular, if we do not have a teacher-student relationship with that particular teacher, then covering might not be the best thing. It actually might be good to say something clearly. And so, of course, that means we have to investigate carefully to make sure that the criticism that we're making is well-founded. And in that case, then there's not a negativity associated with that criticism. But if we repeat it just based on we heard that someone said that someone said that someone said, and it's not true what we're saying, then yes, there would be a fault again. Gelwa dabochi ginetso denso yona dene chö pangye netso malebila.
Mare ta te do dilaware. Pena sashakaji nyama geluno to koro tawalanda mara jeshi jatu yares.
So, in terms of what you mentioned about the criticizing Dharma or abandoning Dharma and a worry about that, one way to approach this is that Sakya, Nyingma, Kagyu, Geluk, they all have different views, different doctrinal views. And so the differences are this, bala, bala, bala. But don't say that, don't say that difference means that this one is better or this one is not good. So in that way, you can very easily avoid accumulating that fault just by how you use the words.
that yo jasaron moche to korosula pasike chativares. Ani madu korosu tawa de tawa kandisires. Te tawa de chore de tawa de mare de ne lava yin chipule mina salres. Lejares.
So if you look at the teachings of, for example, Gyaltsabje, one of Lama Tsongkhapa's disciples, he would explain like perhaps some of the disagreements that he would have with certain Nyingma teachers, but he would always do so in a respectful way. And in his very same writings, he would clearly state how when that becomes an actual denigration, this is the karma of abandoning the Dharma. So one needs to be careful of that. So these various lamas, they have their own modes of study and practice, and they are often explaining from the perspective of what works for them. And then so for us as a student to say, you know what, it's this lama's teaching and this practice that resonates with me, so I'm going to pursue that, but these other things are wonderful that they might work for other people. That's a very good approach to have.
I just listened to in a class where the teacher was explaining the difference between Gyaltsabje and Kedubje in terms of their styles. And I think the explanation was Gyaltsabje is more gentle, and Kedubje is more like strong. And he would say, oh, that person is an idiot.
Yes, no, that's right. And in fact, that's why in the Tankas you see Kedrup has kind of like the wide bulging eyes, and Gyaltsabje looks very peaceful. Ko di Lama Tsongkhapa gi nangla Gyaltsabje gi drotan kaji ne shiwa chene neutra matuya dene Kedrupje ko tets jiko tsapo katuk mepa soya gine so chiktua.
Me ta te da mara yo res ngi te tan se teres. Da ta korota chilu just chimo jeyo was. Jeten de no res te no te la ni ta ni ba ku tsawore.
Yeah, so Geshe said like you're right, and that like different lamas have different styles, and so like you know we can say, you know, that that's not what our view is this, but generally for folks like us, he would say, you know, this isn't my view, but that's what they were holding. That way we avoid that worry of kind of abandoning the Dharma. But Geshe said that even if you look at Kedrupje's writings, he might have said that the way the Lama is explaining this thing doesn't make sense, or it's mistaken, but he never says that that sect or that lineage is wrong and one shouldn't follow that. He doesn't think that you'll find that in Kedrupje's writings. Right, so clear, even though Kedrupje was more wrathful, he never said that like from amongst these four schools this one is like useless or is bad or anything like that. You won't find that in his writing.
So to summarize, we can politely say, no, this is not for me, but we should never or be very careful to say that this is wrong.
Nganso lama chik labna di nga chegyu yo mares labna digires ine di halepe notrus labna di chichena labe yo mares sab chego gire dua. Yes, no, we do have to be very careful. So yes, we can refrain from doing it, but we have to be careful in the way that we explain that to the Lama. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, no, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And I think that we've covered have we covered everyone's questions, Dave?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Oh, we're actually 40 minutes past, so I loved the discussion. I think people stuck around, so I think everybody got a lot out of it. We're happy to stay longer, but you know, I do think maybe people have to get on with their day. But thank you so much for sticking with us, and please, you know, do join us next week for Words of My Perfect Teacher if you can. See you later.
Thank you so much.
If there are other people who are interested, maybe Geshe can explain all the vowels one time.
Don't put
teaching on the vowels.
He has a plan. This is planned. It's coming. It's coming. Take care, everybody.
And clarity.
Thank you. Thank you.